Worcester, 1925. At 7 o'clock on the morning of Friday the 27th of November 1925, charwoman Florence Hardwick arrived at her job at the Garibaldi Inn in Wilds Lane, Worcester, to find the pub in disarray and seemingly deserted. Although she could see no smoke, an unmistakable smell of burning permeated the building. Mrs. Hardwick called out several times, but nobody answered. Concerned, she ran to neighbours for assistance and was accompanied back to the pub by Daniel Oram. Together with Mrs. Hardwick, Oram began to search for her employers, eventually going down into the pub's cellar, where the source of the foul, smoky smell immediately became apparent. On the cellar floor lay the bodies of the landlord, 31-year-old Ernest George Alton Laight, and his wife Dolly Sabrina Laight, aged 30. Both bodies were superficially charred, having been covered in paper which had then been set alight, presumably to try and destroy the bodies, and with them any evidence of the killer's identity. Knowing that the Laights had 2 young children, Oram and Mrs. Hardwick rushed upstairs to the bedrooms. There they found 6-year-old Joan still fast asleep in bed and mercifully completely unharmed. Her 2-year-old brother Robert lay face down in his cot, sadly dead. Joan was carried out of the house and was later placed in the care of relatives. The police were called along with Dr. Edward Walpole Simmons, who spent much of the morning examining the bodies. When he left the pub, the doctor was asked his opinion on the causes of death. "I cannot say, it is a complete mystery," he replied. Post-mortem examinations were carried out on the 3 bodies, resolving the mystery of how they met their deaths. Mr. and Mrs. Laight had both been shot in the chest. The gunshot wounds had initially been disguised by the charring on their bodies. In both cases a single bullet had penetrated the heart and lung, and Mr. Laight had an additional gunshot wound to his left eye. Young Bobby Laight was found to have a fractured skull. Meanwhile, the search of the pub revealed a pair of rubber gloves lying at the top of the cellar steps. The drawer had been removed from the till and lay empty on the floor, along with a scattering of copper coins and slot machine tokens. Even as the police began their investigations into the mysterious death of the Laight family, a chance remark appeared to have solved the case for them. Between 7:30 and 8 o'clock on the morning after the murders, a probationary police constable, Herbert Burrows, approached a colleague, Constable William Devy, complaining of feeling ill, with pains around his heart, and asking where he might get some brandy. Burrows then asked Devy if he had heard about the affairs at the Garibaldi in Wilds Lane. When Constable Devy said that he'd heard nothing, Burrows went on to give him details of the killing and the kitty found dead in bed. When he asked him how Burrows knew, he replied, "A man told me." Only then did Devy realise that Burrows had actually been talking about the murders in some detail before the police had officially known about them. They had first been informed at the police station at 9 a.m. that Mr. and Mrs. Laight had been shot. Yet Burrows seemed to have known their fate at least an hour before. As a result, Devy went straight to Detective Sergeant Fisher to report his strange conversations with Burrows. Burrows should have gone off duty at 2 o'clock on the afternoon of the 27th of November. He was planning to go to London to arrange his forthcoming marriage. However, he found himself being interviewed by Detective Sergeant Fisher about his detailed knowledge of the Garibaldi Inn murders. Following the interview, Burrows' lodgings were searched. Burrows rented rooms in Wilds Lane, almost opposite the Garibaldi Inn, where he was known to be a regular drinker. When Fisher searched his bedroom, he found an unlicensed, fully loaded American revolver in a locked drawer, along with a box of cartridges and 3 empty cartridge cases. In a suitcase under the bed, Fisher found 34 £1 notes, 26 10-shilling notes, and more than £22 in silver coins, along with some slot machine tokens. Finally, the detective found receipts and paperwork apparently indicating that Burrows was in considerable debt to a moneylender. Herbert Burrows was arrested and at 4 p.m. on the 27th of November was formally charged with the murders of the Laight family. He immediately confessed, saying, "I voluntarily and fully admit that I killed at 12:50 a.m. on the 27th Mr. and Mrs. Laight and Robert Laight. The cause will remain unknown. I apologise to the officers and men of the Worcester City Police for the disgrace thus incurred." When Burrows was searched on his arrest, a further £17 10-shillings in notes was found on his person, along with more silver coins. Burrows appeared before magistrates at the Guildhall on the 4th of December 1925. Undefended, he was committed for trial at the next assizes. When asked if he had anything to say in reply to the charges against him, Burrows said that he wished only to clear up one point. The money found on him when he was searched after his arrest was his own money, which he had saved from his wages for his leave. The money in the suitcase in his bedroom had been stolen from 2 cash boxes in the upstairs room of the pub. There was little doubt that Burrows was guilty. Finding himself short of money and in debt, he stayed after hours at the pub on the night of Friday the 27th of November, enjoying a glass of whisky. He'd shot Ernest Laight in the pub cellar, and when Dolly had come down to investigate the noise, he'd shot her too, dragging her body next to her husband's. Young Robert was killed in case his crying alerted people to a problem at the pub. When the boy cried at being disturbed, Burrows had hit him on the head, fracturing his skull. The only hope of defence was to prove that Burrows was insane. The defence produced evidence that Burrows was suffering from syphilis and was displaying some of the symptoms of nervous degeneracy associated with the disease. However, the prosecution refuted any suggestions of insanity, maintaining the murder of the Laight's family was cold-blooded and premeditated, with robbery as a motive. Burrows had been held in Gloucester prison pending his trial since the 29th of November, during which time he had been under observation by Dr. Bell, the medical officer. "I consider he is a perfectly sane man," stated Dr. Bell, although he conceded that there were some apparent symptoms of nervous degeneracy associated with syphilis. Burrows had described the killings to Dr. Bell in great detail, and at no time had he shown any remorse for his actions. Dr. Smith of Winson Green Prison in Birmingham disagreed. He had been asked to examine Burrows, and had also been told about the killings by the accused. Smith felt that the defendant's demeanour while relating the details of the crime was indicative of mental abnormality, and he believed that Burrows was in the early stages of general paralysis as a result of his syphilitic status. Dr. Fenton of Powick Mental Asylum concurred with Smith's opinion. It was left to Mr. Justice Sankey to sum up the case for the jury, paying particular attention to the legalities of the insanity defence. He then adjourned the court for lunch, asking the jury to consider their verdict, and by the time the court reconvened 30 minutes later, the jury had decided that Herbert Burrows was guilty of all 3 charges of murder against him. Burrows showed no emotion as Sankey sentenced him to death, standing rigidly to attention while the sentence was pronounced. He refused to allow his counsel to appeal his conviction and was executed at Gloucester Prison on the 17th of February 1926 by Thomas Pierpoint, who was assisted by William Wills. Before his death, he composed a letter to Doris Laight's mother, in which he stressed that the rumours of an affair between him and Dolly were completely untrue.